Good morning. Welcome to the Network Breakfast. My name is Tom Basie, and I'm going to let each of our participants introduce themselves and what they do and as much contact information as they wish to give. And then we'll get on with Harry Bernstein, attorney at law, with the 3 R's of why federal cannabis legalization could happen now. We're all interested in seeing what, because things have been changing so rapidly, and apparently Ohio and maybe the nation has got to change, and we're going to make this stuff legal. And so we're going to let Harry talk about that. But first, we're going to introduce ourselves. And the first one on my left is Jeff Hexter. Good morning, Jeff. Please give us a little about yourself.
Good morning, Tom. I'm Jeff Hexter. My company is Always Keep Computing. I work with the home and the small office user who is stuck with technology problems and have run out of people to ask for help. Lately, I've been doing helping a bunch of people upgrade from old dying laptops into much more modern machines, and that involves helping them select what they want and then setting it up and transferring the information from the old machine to the new machine so that everything's back where it needs to be. So if you know somebody that is so frustrated with their laptop that they want to throw it out the window, I'd like to be there to help catch it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Before I go on, if anybody knows a mailbox repair company, I would love an introduction to them. I have damage to my mailbox that I am not skilled at repairing, and I'd love a referral to a company that can help fix the mailbox. Thanks.
We're talking about an actual mailbox like down at the corner of your driveway?
Yes, an actual physical mailbox outside.
Because those other kind of mailboxes, you could fix those.
Not an electronic one.
You know, Outlook, Gmail, you know. Okay, you mean the actual receptacle.
Yes, the hole that they put the mail into, the wood casing on it is breaking, and
where
somebody.
Scott's pith helmet belongs on that person.
Right.
That they put the
that male person, yes.
Sure.
Male, female, whatever.
Sure. Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for coming, and thanks for all that information. And we'll look forward to seeing how many people get in contact with you to help them, because you are so good at that stuff. Good morning. My name is Tom Basie. I'm an IT professional. If it has something to do with a computer, I can help you with it. And it spans many different things. So get a hold of me and let's see if I can help you out, whatever it is you need to do. I usually never say no. Tom Basie, IT professional. Now we'd like to wish a very good morning to our good friend and relatively frequent participant, Scott Morrison. Good morning, Scott.
Good morning, everybody. My name, as Tom said, is Scott Morrison. My company is Discovery Photo. I am a full-time, full-service photographer. Have been for almost 30 years now. Specialize in everything from legal, corporate, industrial, architectural, do a lot of business headshots, modeling portfolios, and I used to crash parties on the weekends, but lately all the parties have kind of dried up. So I'm free on weekends, so we could do senior portraits and other fun things. So if you need any photography services, please give me a call. Scott Morrison, Discovery Photo, when image counts.
And it really does. And Scott is a master photographer, wonderful photographer. We've seen most of his work, and it is exquisite. Thank you, Scott. Thanks for joining us today. Now we'd like to say good morning to Chris Walters. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Tom. How are you doing?
Real good, thanks.
See-through windows. I provide vinyl replacement windows and glass block. I cover a territory from Sandusky to the Pennsylvania border, from Cleveland to Canton. I go out and take a look at every house that you call me about, and then within 24 to 48 hours, I will email you a quote. We will do the install, or I will sell you the windows directly. My phone number is 330-604-0403. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for joining us. And now we'd like to introduce Lee Jackson. Good morning, Lee.
Good morning, everybody. Lee Jackson with Right at Home. We are a non-medical home care company providing the right services at the right place at the right time. In other words, we want to help people age in place, wherever their place might be, whether that's a condominium or a house or an apartment, or even if they're in an assisted living facility. We can provide companionship and help with activities of daily living, basic hygiene, basic cooking, basic little bit of cleaning, whatever it takes to keep that person happy and healthy in their home environment, because studies have shown that people do the best when they're in their own environment and when they're at home. Lee Jackson, right at home.
Excellent. Thank you, Lee, and thanks for your service to our community. Good morning, lovely and talented Trina.
Good morning. First of all, if you want to see before and after for Scott's work, let's do this. Isn't Scott amazing photographer? Wrinkles went away in about 2 seconds. My name is Trina Gigax. I'm a freelance copy editor. I work with your writing to improve it, help it be more readable for the reader. I work with web content, newsletters, email mailings. We go over sentence structure, punctuation, word use, just about everything top to bottom to make sure that it's professional and precise and in the best condition it can be before you upload it. Trina Gigax, fresheyesreading.com.
Excellent. Thank you, Trina. And now we'd like to introduce Marty. Marty Kelbell, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, everyone. As you can see behind me, thank you for everyone for voting us the top workplace. Appreciated that. I can give kudos to Scott. He did the pictures for my condo, and the seller of that condo said his parents paid a premium for it, and he wanted to sell it for a premium. And I said the market isn't bearing that right now, but he did get a premium over $10,000 of the highest condo in that area because Scott gave us the wow pictures. I'm sure helped with that. So that helped quite a bit. If you're looking to buy or sell, please let me know. I can help you with that. This is the seller's markets right now. And it's not uncommon for houses to be listed in the morning, have an offer by evening. So give me a call at 216-544-4164. I'll be glad to help you. There's no reason to rent when the interest rates are so historically low. Your mortgage payment will be less than your rent payment.
Wow. Okay. Thank you, Marty. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for all that information. And thank you once again, Scott. We're all indebted to Scott for excellent pictures of people we know. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. People we know, and it has helped. I know I sent a couple of people, especially the one that he took, somebody was running for mayor, and he took an absolutely stunning photo. Excellent. It was wonderful to work with. Okay, we're going to move on. Good morning to Griff. Good morning, Griff. Let's hear.
Hey, good morning to you. Hey, I'm Griff King with Dollar Bank. I'm in the treasury management business there, which means I try to help small and medium businesses accelerate their cash flow, slow down their disbursements, and hold onto their money a little longer than normal. Griff King, Dollar Bank.
Excellent. Thank you, Griff. Thanks for coming in. I appreciate it a lot. Thank you. And now we'd like to say good morning to one of our best friends. Of course, I could say that with each of you. It's Shalom Plotkin. Good morning, Shalom.
Good morning, Tommy. How are you this morning?
Oh, I'm doing just fine. Thank you.
Yeah, you're earning a gift. God bless. So at Right at Home, our job is to help our seniors, our clients, to stay safe in their homes. Yesterday, I got a call from a woman's son, and he said, you know what? That caregiver who was coming, could you send her back again? We love seeing her. Mom really wants her. And they do just great work together. So I was like, what work are they doing? You know, I was worried, you know, they're out in the garden. He said, no, they could do that, but actually they've been baking. I'm like, yay, enjoy. So that's an example of what we do. We match up one caregiver with one client. We support the caregivers, their training, their background checks, their classes, and that ongoing. And the clients don't have to worry about workman's comp or taxes or supervision or other things like that. They just know that their loved one is in good hands. It's right at home.
Excellent. Thank you, Shalom. And once again, thank you for your service to our community. Thank you so much, Shalom. Okay, now we're going to say good morning to Ray Antonelli. Good morning, Ray.
Good morning, everyone. By the way, Scott, I've referred a number of headshot clients to you, but I don't know what your current charge for headshots is. Can you share that with us?
Scott, your mute is on. Thank you.
Thank you.
There it is.
The regular fee is $79 for a headshot. That includes one fully edited digital copy that can be uploaded, shared, printed, whatever you want.
Super, thank you. As most of you know, I changed companies last November, and I'm currently the senior mortgage banker at Leader One, and we specialize in reverse mortgages for seniors. I can still originate any type of mortgage, and I do a few forward mortgages as well for people who want to buy a home or things like that. But my primary emphasis is on reverse mortgages for seniors. And I typically get a lot of referrals from folks like you because you may not be old enough to qualify for a reverse mortgage, but your parents are old enough. And in many cases, they want to be taken care of in their senior years, and a reverse mortgage in many cases will do that for them. So Ray Antonelli, senior mortgage banker at Leader One Financial. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ray, and thanks for providing that service as well. Excellent. We appreciate your efforts. Okay. And I think there's nobody else here, right? I'm looking to make sure. That phone is, I believe that phone is Harry, right?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay. All right, Harry. We're going to give Harry the floor now, and Harry's going to discuss the 3 R's of why federal cannabis legalization could happen now. Good morning, Harry. You have the floor.
The floor is mine. Thank you, guys. So,
yes.
First, want to talk about who I am, a little bit about my background, how we got here. And for those of you who are on the call, you're pretty familiar with it. Our family had a beer and wine distributor for many years. What a beer and wine distributor is we're the middleman for delivering adult beverages and getting them to your home. We contract with the suppliers, whether it's breweries and wineries, Great Lakes Brewing Company, etc., deliver to the retail establishment, bars, restaurants, and the grocery stores, etc. That was my background. I grew up doing that, worked there as a kid, started in the warehouse, was working in sales. Because it's a highly regulated industry, I went to law school. It's good to have an in-house attorney. Plus, we've had this discussion before. We had 2 different Teamster locals to negotiate. So there's many things when dealing with the Teamsters, some of which is legal, others which is just personal relationships. So that was the area I worked in for many, many years. As a lot of other industries have consolidated, that business consolidated, and we were bought out. I was practicing law full-time, focusing on workers' compensation because that was my background at the beer company, and employment law. Kind of moved into working more with people with disabilities, and that was my focus and is my focus with my law practice. But as I say to anybody, give me a call if you think there's a legal issue, because I went to law school with 250 other students, as well as living in Cleveland my whole life and being an attorney in Cleveland for 32 years now. I can make a phone call to somebody that's not going to cost you $500, and I can put you in touch with somebody who's not going to scam you either. So, so that's the legal end. About 3 years ago, I had a family member who had some health issues, and it would suggest that she look at treating with medical cannabis. I didn't know much about the product. I'm no choir boy, but by any means, it certainly wasn't anything that I used at all. I mean, did I try in college? Sure. So I started digging into it, and what I saw was you've got a real crazy situation in the United States, because the United States made marijuana, and cannabis refers to the name of the plant. The plant that people interchangeably use for marijuana and hemp is actually referred to as the cannabis plant. In the 1930s, as a way to control the immigrants, in this case, the Mexican immigrants, they decided to make cannabis illegal. It was called marijuana by the Mexican immigrants, and that's why the language is in the law today. No different than what they did in the late 19 teens, early 20s when they created alcohol prohibition. The government wanted to take away important things that were important to cultures of immigrants as a means to control the immigrants. So they made alcohol illegal in the 20s because the Italians and the Germans and the Eastern Europeans were using it, and they made marijuana illegal in the 30s. The difference is President Roosevelt, when he got elected, said, man, we can create some jobs and revenue by bringing alcohol back, making it legal again in 1933. And there wasn't as strong a demand from the other immigrants, the Mexicans and the Chinese immigrants. So again, they did what made sense to the voters at the time and repealed prohibition in the 1920s. So since the 30s, cannabis has been illegal at the federal level. 1971, as things got more progressive in this country in the 60s and early 70s, people were making a plan and a point to let's make marijuana legal. It's certainly, there's no data that shows it's harmful to people. Anything's harmful if abused, but there's no data at all to show that this product should be treated anything different than alcohol or tobacco. And nobody's saying let kids go out and have all they want and buy all they want in any form they want. And in fact, we'll get to why we need federal regulation to prevent some of those things. But you had Richard Nixon running on a law and order platform in 1968, and he was going to control the hippies and the blacks, and this is documented. His words, not mine. And he decided, even after the commission voted or suggested that they leave marijuana out of the Controlled Substances Act, he demanded that it be included and listed as a Schedule I narcotic. So for your backstory, the Controlled Substances Act, which was implemented in 1971, put in place a lot of regulations on drugs, and gave authority to the FDA and authority to law enforcement. And one of the things was it classifies drugs in Schedules 1 through 5, I believe. So Schedule I drugs are drugs that are most addictive. There is no beneficial use to them. Marijuana is in there along with heroin, and I don't have the list, but the federal government of the United States to this day believes that marijuana, cannabis, is more dangerous to you than cocaine. You can go out and get a cocaine prescription from a pharmacy, and that's legal under federal law. You cannot in any way, shape, or form do business and touch the cannabis product without breaking federal law. So that means farming, selling, other businesses who actually provide services have had difficulty getting banking and insurance services because of that. If you own a cannabis business, you cannot, and Griff will back me up on this, you cannot in any way get banking services. So it's a very strange situation, because in the 1990s, there's decades of research that show that cannabis can be beneficial to people from a health perspective. Certainly, a lot of studies came out of Europe and in Israel saying there were certain conditions. Initially, glaucoma was one of them, chronic pain conditions, seizure conditions, where studies have proven over and over again that this is a beneficial product. So as usual, trends start on one coast or the other. In this case, they start in California. And in the 90s, California said, you know what, we're going to vote to make it legal for medical use in the state of California. And that really started a whole chain reaction where other states said, you know what, our people and our doctors are telling us this is good, they need it. We've got opioid crises in the United States, to the point where now we have 34 states where cannabis is legal on the state level, still illegal federally, but you can eat. These states all have a system in place where if you need it and a doctor thinks it will help you, you can get a medical recommendation. You can't get a prescription because it's illegal, but you can get a recommendation to use cannabis. 33 states, 33 different sets of rules. It's a mess. About 5 years ago, some states said, you know what? Let's treat it like alcohol and tobacco. Let's regulate it. Let's tax it. We'll generate revenue. And we're going to handle it. But again, to this day, it's still illegal at the federal level. So when I was researching the medical use for my family member, it was my mother-in-law. There's no secrets. I've mentioned that before. She's 96. Knock on wood, she'll be 96 in 2 weeks. And outside of chronic pain, she's dealing with everything else well. So when I started researching it, as anything else, you look, we're all business people. Is there an opportunity to do business? And at the same time, I had been contacted by a friend of mine who was specifically looking to get into the business somehow. Certain things I can and can't do because of my law license. I can't be involved with any company that directly touches the product. But 2018 happens and the Democrats take over the House, and then within 2 months, there's about 3 bills in the House that want to legalize cannabis at the federal level. So in my mind, I'm thinking there may be an opportunity, because when I was with the beer company, not only did we comply with all of Ohio's laws, but we had to comply with all the federal alcohol beverage laws. So I'm thinking to myself, you've got a built-in customer base, and currently there's 20,000 businesses that are licensed to grow or manufacture cannabis in the United States at the state level. That's not even counting the retail stores. That's just the manufacturers. But there were 3 bills introduced in 2019 that said, basically, let's treat cannabis like alcohol and tobacco, or alcohol or tobacco. Let's regulate it. Let's legalize it, regulate it, and tax it. Now I'm going to get into this. So my mind is you got 20,000 people there, you're going to need consulting services. I have somewhat of a background, but I was able to, some connections I had. We built a team, a strong team, and I'm going to share my screen here, which I should have done. Tom, can you let me share my screen?
Of course. I should have clicked on this earlier.
Sorry. I should have asked earlier instead of just me talking and you
How
guys
about
looking
now,
at
Harry?
each other.
Try it now.
All right. I'm going to do this. Oh, I don't want to do it. Come on. All right. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
All right. So we formed, the short answer is we spent about a year putting together a group called of experts in this area called Verde Compliance Partners. Jim and Tony Haynes, who the short answer is they use networking groups such as this, but I had within the industry put me in touch with an individual named Jim McCoy. Jim lectures and speaks all over and represents companies when they're dealing with the Bureau of Alcohol. Well, I take that back. When they're dealing with federal agencies in compliance. So alcohol and tobacco are currently regulated by what's known as the Tobacco and Tax and Trade Bureau. It used to be called the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. At some point, they decided it didn't make sense to lump explosives and firearms with alcohol and tobacco regulation. So they split that off. So Jim I had known or heard of through some other people. I met with Jim and I said, Jim, am I off my rocker, which many times they have, but do you see there's a need for this service right now? He says, absolutely. He says, tobacco and alcohol regulations have been in place for years, yet I still am consulting for people, let alone 20,000 people needing services with something they have no idea what they're dealing with. So we created this team, Jim and I and a couple other people, and developed a company called Verde Compliance Partners that will help current state licensees comply with and prepare for federal legalization. Because what we saw in 2018 with the Democrats coming in is this is going to happen sooner. This is going to happen for sure. Whether it's 1, 2, or 5 years, the federal government's going to say, we are going to legalize, we are going to regulate, and we are going to tax cannabis. Because as we get into the 3 R's here in a minute, it makes no sense not to have that in place. So we want to get a hold of these companies ahead of time, the current licensees, and say, we can help you today, because once that bill's passed, you're going to have 20,000 people try to get federal permits. Government's going to be overwhelmed. And if you're not prepared, and if you do something wrong, you don't get your federal permit, you're shut down. So for example, if you have a nice little operation in Ohio, you're growing cannabis, you're making vape oils or whatever, and you're got a $10 million operation and you don't get your federal permit, they can shut you down. So we're meeting with people today to say, hey, look, we can help you prepare today. I'm not going to get in our company, we can talk about it later, but I'm going to get into why, number one, we think it's going to be legal much sooner than projected. So Jim and Tony did a great job. They wrote a nice little story here, which has been featured in Cannabis and Tech Today. So I can send these links out later. 3 hours of why federal cannabis legalization could happen now. And again, Tony and Jim have a combined 60 plus years experience working with the federal government, and then another 20 years consulting since then, combined on alcohol, tobacco issues. Why now? Regulation. So when we talk about legalizing cannabis, as I said, nobody's just saying, okay, today cannabis is legal. Have at it, everybody. No rules in place. We're not going to collect tax money. You just go grow everything you want in your backyard and sell it to your friends and have at it. That's not the case. One of the primary reasons that we think cannabis is going to be legalized is so it can be regulated. About a year ago, you had hundreds of people dying from, and we all know what vaping products is. It's basically you take a organic product, distill it down to an oil, and people can smoke it through it heats up the oil and whatever. I don't know the science behind it. People were dying. Why were they dying? Because you had people buying black market cannabis, which companies put an additive into so they could sell more. So for example, if you needed a 1/10 of an ounce of cannabis oil, they would throw in, I believe it's vitamin E acetate. And that's what was killing people. So no different than prohibition with the bathtub gin. You had people making some pretty, actually poisonous products and selling it as an alcohol beverage during the times of prohibition in the 20s. So what do we need? We need regulation. We need to standardize the product. You need to be able to test the products. The states don't have the resources to test these products that the federal government does. And it's a public safety issue. Again, it's real easy to point to the problem of face. Another issue, myself as a parent, I've got a 17-year-old son. He's high functioning, but he's on the autism spectrum. When I was looking to help my mother-in-law and I saw that they were selling cannabis products in the shape of gummy bear candies, it scared the living piss out of me, because if that's sitting around and a kid gets his hand on it, you're going to have a big problem, right? When I was in the beer and wine business, we went out of our way to make sure we didn't develop products that appeal to kids. Now, there were some bad actors, and there always are bad actors, but again, that's another need for regulation. So that's number one, public safety and regulation. Revenue. Well, the government just handed out, what, trillions of dollars in money? Trillions of dollars in money. They got to recoup it some way. What's one good way to recoup it? Legalize cannabis. Tax Foundation, independent organization, just came out with a report, and what they looked at was, this was primarily for states, what would be the best way to tax marijuana that's most beneficial? What do you want to do when you tax something? Number one, you want to generate revenue, but you also, in this case, want to eliminate the black market. So if you overtax cannabis, and now all of a sudden to buy high quality tested, and again, I'm not a user, so don't tell me what high quality is, but high quality tested, well packaged, I'm following all the safety rules, but you've got to pay 10 times as much as you could buy it from your dealer down the street, you're not going to achieve that goal of eliminating the black market. So there's a lot of things going into how you're going to go about taxing it, but certainly legalizing it, regulating it, and taxing it could generate a lot of revenue. This report estimates, if it was done on a federal level, and we're talking about full and they call it recreational or adult use. Recreational or adult use means it would be treated like alcohol or tobacco. You must be 21. You can only sell it through certain licensed accounts. You can only use it in certain ways. You would be prevented from operating motor vehicles while under the influence. Again, just imagine this product is alcohol or tobacco. That's where the focus is on when it comes to legalization, regulation, and taxation. So how would it be taxed? This report says the best way to tax it is similar to alcohol. Higher proof liquors get taxed at a different rate than beer or wine. Wine gets taxed at a different rate than beer. That's what this suggests. The report suggests that in the first year alone, it would generate $80 billion for the U.S. And that's just taxing. And that's the excise tax. That's not to mention increased income taxes, as well as sales taxes, which go to the county and state for the most part. So there's definite benefits to legalizing, regulating, and taxing this. Another piece is, and doesn't get into jobs. Oh, when you talk about revenue, jobs, it's estimated that legalizing cannabis recreationally at the federal level and following through at the state level would create 500,000 new jobs. A lot of people are out of work. A lot of people are changing from the type of work they did. So we can certainly see the need for new jobs. Reform. Social justice reform. This really, and criminal justice. I want to show you a report here. This is a recent report from the American Civil Liberties Union. Report after report after report shows that cannabis laws have been disproportionately enforced against people of color. Even though blacks and whites use cannabis at the same rate, meaning percentage per capita use of population, blacks are arrested much more. And it's usually, and I can pull another report that just came, it was on 538, and it's usually used just as a reason to stop and detain a black person. And again, the data is there. Well, we all have seen what's happened in the last month about social reform, and consistently people are saying we need to end this racially discriminatory policy of federally illegal cannabis. Not only that, but we want to take some of the money and put it back into these cities and areas that have been destroyed by the, quote, war on drugs. The war on drugs was ill-construed, was handled poorly, devastated communities, and now you're seeing a lot of reform, and it's going to be a big election year issue. Legalization of the product is going to be on the ballot in at least 4 states. It's probably going to pass in 2, Arizona pretty clearly, potentially up in Wyoming or North Dakota. So it's going to be a big election year issue. I was watching Stephen Colbert the other night. He had Cory Booker on. He spent, in about the 15 minutes of the interview, he spent a good 5 minutes talking about legalizing cannabis because it's used by law enforcement poorly. The enforcement by law enforcement is used poorly to discriminate, as well as putting money back into the cities and generating revenue and jobs in general. One of the primary bills in Congress was authored by Kamala Harris, who was an excellent shot of being the next vice president of the United States. So it's a major, major issue. It's going to come up. And then really, what are the best regulatory models, which we talk about here? It clearly makes sense to treat it like alcohol and tobacco, a blend of some kind, whether it's, on the tobacco end, you're required to get a permit if you grow the product and if you manufacture it, whether it's into cigarettes, chewing tobacco, etc. Alcohol is the same thing. Everybody needs a permit who handles that product up until the sale of the store. It's taxed generally. Both products are taxed at the manufacturer's level. So the federal government's collecting the tax money early in the stream. Whether it's taxed as a percentage of sales price or a percentage of the THC in the product or the other chemicals in the product is something else. But those are the issues to be debated. What do we see? And again, we talked about this transition, illegal to legal. You're going to have a black market industry, but it's going to shrink over time as people figure out. Again, do I want to buy something, I don't know where it was grown, what was added to it, or do I want to buy something that's legal, that, you know, has been tested, that has the certain amount of other agricultural products in it, whatever. There's a lot involved. Another problem out there, again, we talked about the banking issue. If you legalize this product, you know, all of a sudden, all these entities will have access to banks, insurance, tax deductions. So just to give you a story or two, because the cannabis companies don't have access to banks, they will go down to the your local county tax collector with duffel bags of cash to pay their taxes, because they can only be paid in tax, and the tax collectors are not real happy about having millions of dollars of cash sitting in a room somewhere. So that's another thing. Again, we get into who would qualify for a permit. That isn't really what we're talking about. I can explain these things deeper. But the point is the move towards federal legalization of cannabis is accelerating. It's happening quickly. I believe that it will be a primary topic of discussion no matter who gets into office in November and then takes office in January. It's just a matter of the horse trading that's going to go on, because you're going to see the alcohol and tobacco lobbyists are going to say, well, we want you to tax them at the same rate we're being taxed, which makes sense. You're going to see the pharmaceutical companies who are frankly pooping their pants, because a lot of people who are taking cannabis for medical reasons feel much more comfortable and it's much more affordable. And if all of a sudden you can replace all these really, really expensive, highly developed drugs with a product that can be grown in a farmer's yard at 1/10 the cost, the pharmaceutical companies are pooping their pants. Now there's room for them too, because you can take cannabis and distill it into drugs that can be used for more complicated diseases such as the seizure conditions and situations like that. So again, we see it coming. You know, what do I think? I think that you're gonna get a strong bill in Congress early next year, March, something like that. It's gonna take them another 9 months to debate the form, because some people are gonna say we want more money for the social part. Others are gonna say we want to guarantee that we can get certain amount of licenses, or that if we've got a federal alcohol license, we can easily get a federal cannabis license. By the time that's done, you're talking about the end of the year, early 2022. They'll have about 180 days to put in regulations, and then they'll start applications. So I think mid-2022 to late 2022 is when you're going to have cannabis legalized in the United States. Could be wrong, could be faster, could be slower. But I would say that if you have a cannabis license and you're not preparing now, then shame on you. Whether you retain us or whether you're doing it on your own, what I will tell you is we've got the best solution out there. So that's my plug for my business. Questions?
I have a question for you. It said, we believe that cannabis industry, at this point, if you have a budding cannabis industry, is there money?
No pun intended.
Oh, no, right. I didn't even realize what I was saying.
Anyways,
right.
I'm sorry.
If you have a business, can you go to a bank and get a loan on a cannabis business?
Want to answer that for me, Griff? I know the answer. But
After Just a sec. After careful consideration, no.
You cannot
We can't touch it now.
value businesses who are valuable to the community and were deemed essential by state governments because they provide medical cannabis were not able to get COVID-19 loans and couldn't get payroll protection loans to protect their own people's payroll because the federal government. I just read another issue. So if you do a search on bills in Congress and Senate and the House, there's somewhere around 20 to 35 bills that mention cannabis in there. Currently, under federal law and under the law implemented by the military, you are not allowed to re-enlist in the military if you have used cannabis. If you have used cannabis, now that means you either admit to it or you were caught with a joint or something like that. So you are taking our best soldiers potentially, who may be taking a product that in 33 states they can for anxiety and for chronic pain, and saying, we don't want you providing service to our country. That is absolutely asinine. So now there's the bill that just came out of Senate committee that says, you know what, we're not going to do that. We're going to allow good soldiers to re-enlist if they've used cannabis prescribed by a doctor or whatever. We're not going to prevent it. And there's so many other laws like that out there that just, again, it makes no sense. So one swift bill that legalizes all of it takes care of all the other bullshit, frankly, because now you've got a legal product. And generally what the bills say is, we are amending all pieces of the code to exclude marijuana or cannabis from there's legal language they put in there in these bills. So again, it's pretty simple. The way I always phrase it, it makes the most sense to treat it like alcohol and tobacco. It's legalize it, regulate it, and tax it, because that's the key pieces: the regulation and then the revenue piece. But you can't do either without legalizing it.
I got a question for you too, Harry.
Sure.
So one of my clients does use it for not just anxiety, but also for eye pressure, as well as for appetite. And he has discovered, even though he got the card, that his local dealer, who is not legal, will deliver to his apartment door for 1/10 of the cost. Any chance that the dispensary will come down to a more reasonable price for some of their regulated and really actually, medical type drugs?
Well, here's the issue. So as I mentioned, is 33 federally illegal, which in 33 states legal, 33 sets of rules. What was going on in Ohio is about 4 years ago, they were going to get on the ballot full cannabis legalization. It was going to pass. The the Columbus House, the state legislator, in full-blown panic said, we're going to pass our own bill first, making it legal at the medical, for medical purposes. So they quickly passed a poorly written bill. Why did they do it? To undercut the potential legalization of adult use. Ohio's bill took them 3 years to develop regulations and implement it. It is one of the worst bills created from a patient standpoint. Ohio has one of the highest costs in the country per ounce because of the way they wrote their bill and implemented their laws. Make no mistake about it, Ohio is controlled by the strong conservatives, religious right to some extent, and until other industries stand up to them, and there's some talk right now about going back into Columbus and saying, again, because of jobs, because of revenue, we need to make this thing legal for the state of Ohio. Will DeWine veto it? Probably. Will they be able to override the veto? If you put a good enough coalition, sure. But the answer is, Shalom, Ohio's system sucks. Now you've got Oklahoma, which you would think, just off the top of your head, I would like to say Ohio's more progressive than Oklahoma, but they're not. Oklahoma did not limit the number of licenses. They just said if you're qualified and you pass all our checks and balances, you'll get a license to sell. Their cost is much, much less. They do have delivery in place. Ohio doesn't. That was one of the things I looked at when I was looking at possibly getting into the area. So the answer is if you, Shalom, as an advocate for your patients, and your patients and other advocate groups beat on the legislator enough and explain that to them. And again, it's a revenue thing. You're right. The dealer's selling at 1/10 the cost. There's a blend there. So if Ohio can get their costs down to 1/3 of what it is now, you're and allow delivery. Yeah, I'd rather buy it from somebody legally if I'm only paying a little bit more than somebody illegally, because now your clients, and nobody's turning him in. He's breaking the law. He's breaking state law, and that's an issue. And that can cost them. That can cost you housing benefits and things such as that too. That can cost you your state benefits. So that's my concern. But the answer is yes. Each state's different. Louisiana's is really tough. California obviously is wide open as far as that goes from a medical standpoint. But yeah, that's the answer there. And that's things that a federal legalization would help.
Harry, is it more likely that Ohio will permit this before the federal government, or does it look like the federal government will legalize it first and then Ohio? Or
I'm not involved in a lot of the Ohio discussions right now. They wanted to put it on the ballot this year, but they didn't get enough signatures, obviously, because it's tough to collect signatures when there's no crowds and festivals or anything like that. So they didn't. In Ohio, interesting, again, I don't want to go into it. I have not been thrilled with Ohio's government for a while. But a few years ago, when this ballot issue was going to pass, Ohio made it much more difficult for a citizen's issue to get on the ballot. Our legislators don't think we're intelligent enough to create issues for ourselves. They think and that's fine if they do their job, but they're not doing their job. So they really, really restricted. They increased the number of signatures required. They increased the number of signatures per county. So it's almost impossible to get an issue on the ballot anymore in Ohio. It is what it is. Right now, we can't change it. I believe the Supreme Court's upheld all those situations. Going back to your question, I'm not involved at the state level discussions, but I believe that the feds would make it legal before Ohio. But here's what's going to happen, Tom, just like with casinos. So I think it's almost 2 years ago, the Supreme Court said sports betting is legal in the United States. Other states are up and running. Ohio's dragging their feet. So I believe they passed a bill, but they're still going to drag their feet. They did it with casinos. They let Kentucky, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, West Virginia open casinos while we got our ass kicked from a revenue standpoint. I think that's what's going to happen again. I think the feds will, and again, it's not pure guess, based on experience and what I read. The feds will legalize it, but what's going to happen is once it's legal at the federal level, now you can have interstate commerce, okay? So again, the law will read from a federal standpoint is we now allow, under our regulations, you can sell and grow cannabis. You still got to comply with your state law. So Ohio may say, you know what, we're not going to allow recreational marijuana sales in Ohio. That's fine. But if New York's going to allow it, and Michigan already allows it, and West Virginia allows it, and Pennsylvania, they're on the fast track to allow recreational, we are going to get killed from a tax revenue and jobs standpoint. So at that point, there might be enough pressure put on Columbus to do it.
Harry, I hear
that makes sense.
I hear that there are a ton of people going to Michigan and getting it.
That is true. Is it legal? No, but for the most part, it's understood. It's from a hands-off situation. If you're bringing it into Ohio, they've got other things they're worried about. Now, if you're bringing in 50 pounds to sell to somebody else, that's a whole different issue. But once you go up to Michigan, and when it was medical only, you had to show your medical card. Now that they've opened it up for recreational, you just got to show them an ID, and you're taking your chances if you come across the border. I wouldn't recommend it.
Well, look at
Aaron?
Toledo. Toledo's sitting right there. All they got to do is go a mile.
Correct. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, when we were first helping my mother-in-law, we went to Michigan because Ohio took so long to implement sales. Trina, I'll be with you in a second.
Sure.
So yeah, but again, if you're the state patrol, you got real big problems. You know,
Right.
some knucklehead teenager coming over with a bag of gummies, you know, you're not going to mess with. Now, if you catch him with it, he's got a problem.
Right.
And in most areas, I'm sorry, have actually decriminalized marijuana. So that's different than making it legal. So a lot of state, county, and county prosecutors saying, you know what, we're just not going to prosecute these people anymore. It's like a speeding ticket, write them a $50 ticket and put them on their way.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry, Trina, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, when I got my medical license for medical reasons, for nausea and appetite, I was really concerned about getting high and everything. But when I went to the state, I went to that Terra something one over on
Terrasana?
Terrasana, yeah.
They're nice guys. I met
And
them. Cool.
yeah, they explained everything, and they told me that a lot of people were going to Michigan, but you don't, because it was easy and cheap. But you know, there's no control. You have no idea what you're getting.
Right.
And I was so afraid of. I know people laugh. I didn't want to get high. I mean, I was just ill and I needed to get better. And I did the vaping with 2 parts CBD oil and 1 part THC, and I guess the THC just boosts the effectiveness of the CBD oil. So it increased my appetite, but not like when you're high, when you remember when you're young and you get the munchies or anything like that. So I was surprised at how safe, and I mean, there were all kinds of things they sold if you wanted to get high, I suppose, or munchables and things like that. But as far as the vaping, I did stop it because I have asthma and my doctor didn't recommend it anymore. But I couldn't believe just how well they explained everything and how safe it was. And, you know, I took away the fear of, you know, getting high and all that kind of stuff. So I was really surprised.
And that goes back, and that goes back to the legalization too. And where we see it and where some of the industry associations look at, you're going to create 2-part. Ideally, the law would create 2 areas of legalization. It's legalization for adult use, and that would fall under the alcohol and tobacco laws. If it's being sold as a medicine, it would be treated as a medicine, have to undergo FDA approval, et cetera. Going back to what Trina says, if you legalize it, you can educate people. You can discuss. You know, there's so many. I'm not an agricultural. Though I grow hay, I don't know anything about the agriculture of marijuana, but it's got so many components within the plant, and it does treat different types of conditions differently. So THC is the psychoactive ingredient. That's what people say is what gets you high. And there's even some debate about that. CBD cannabidiol is another component which has therapeutic properties. So by blending these things along with the terpenes, which are another agricultural and chemical components within the plant, you can treat different types of conditions differently. It's the same thing, you know, when people drink alcohol. You know, people know that beer affects me one way, wine affects me another way, shots affecting me a third way, a nice cocktail on the rocks affecting me a 4th way. So they take those products in different forms too. Again, you can do the same thing here, but without federal standards in place, it makes it more difficult. So for example, somebody goes out and buys a cannabis chocolate bar and decides to slam down the whole thing when maybe you're only supposed to take 1 square, you're going to have a problem. The other issue is, you know, cannabis, you do 2 shots of whiskey, they're going to affect you a lot quicker. It's more soluble than cannabis products are. So all of these things need to be dealt with, and they're not being dealt with. And part of the main reason they're not being dealt with is because the federal government says you can't even study the product, let alone explain to people how it's supposed to work and issues such as that. But yeah, you know, what I highly recommend is initially there were 35 doctors, but there's about 350 doctors. If anybody's looking for names, I can give names and clinics. I work with somebody, she wrote a whole book about how cannabis works with your nutrition, your whole lifestyle change, and how it can benefit you as well, and CBD and the whole things. But again, for it to sit out there and be illegal at the federal level makes absolutely no sense. You cannot make a rational fact-based argument on why it should be illegal. You can make arguments as why it should be regulated, but again, to regulate it, you got to make it legal. I mean, I can make a fact-based argument that high school football, that children should not be allowed to play tackle football. The data shows the brain doesn't develop till 23 years old completely, and that the constant pounding of football over time could lead to brain injuries. Okay? No different in my mind than tobacco. If my son wanted to play football, I'd have a real tough, long discussion. I can't tell you which way I would come out on it, but I have a discussion about it. But nobody talks about that, right? What's more dangerous? Beating on your head 75 times a week versus a doctor telling you to take a little pill for anxiety once a day? I don't know. So, but it's a mess the way it is. And there's no reason for it.
Harry, are businesses all looking into handling this if and when it passes statewide or nationally?
Well, I would imagine if they're not, they're stupid. If you're not looking into it. Certainly, I'll tell you from a high level standpoint, most of your alcohol. So it's fully legal in Canada. Canada made it legal at the federal level a couple years ago now. Now they've got their own issues because each province regulates it differently, and they've got access issues, and there's still high taxation and same type of thing. But Constellation Brands, which owns Corona and a bunch of other things, they're one of the biggest liquor, wine, and beer companies in the United States. They are 50%. I think they're over 50 now. They're 49% partners in one of the biggest cannabis companies in Canada. So your alcohol and tobacco companies are already ready to get into it here.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see certainly the minute CBD was made legal, because then that gets complicated because hemp is basically no THC cannabis. So you can grow hemp legally in the United States. It's got to be tested and have below a certain percentage of THC, and that you can make CBD from. Walmart's, dollar stores, Giant Eagles, everybody's selling CBD. They will do the same thing. What I anticipate is if you are able to have a liquor or a tobacco license, you'll be able to get a cannabis license.
I want to ask Griff if anything comes across his desk that mentions any of the things that we talked about, especially Harry, in a corporate level. You being a representative of a bank where most businesses go to expand. First thing you do is call the bank, get with your banker. And has any of this stuff come across your desk that looks like the bank is going to start dealing with it?
I've heard that they're going to deal with it, but at this point in time, when we're questionnaires for opening accounts, if there's anything to do with the cannabis industry, it's a hard stop. But if the laws change the way Harry's talking about, and this has been fascinating to listen to, we will certainly fall in line with the federal regulations because that's where we're regulated.
Now, it's interesting. There is another bill that's been sitting there called the Safe Banking Act. And that bill would immediately say that cannabis businesses would have access to the banking, specifically access to the banking and insurance industry, even though it's still scheduled. So they're trying to do some stopgap things. That may pass this year. You may get enough headway where they say, at least let's give these guys access to the banking and tax laws. So that may pass this year. There's a lot of talk about that. Again, everybody's for that. The government wants it because they don't want, from a criminal activity standpoint, cash is always going to be preferable to non-cash. From a health standpoint, there are restaurants that don't want cash anymore, right? Because of the COVID-19. So nobody wants cash floating around out there. So, and the banks certainly want the business. When you're talking about billions of dollars, insurance companies want the business. You know, ideally, you'd want to switch the black market to the legal market to tax it. So that's one of the things that may come out, is the Safe Banking Act may come out quicker than full legalization. Just to show you, here's again, I can send you these links. As of 2019, there were over 200,000 full-time workers in the cannabis business, to 300,000. This was and they're adding 64,000 a year. That's where that 500,000 came from if it went legal. You know, here's an interesting thing too. When you talk about bipartisan support, the bill to legalize it passed out of committee with 21 Democrats and 11 Republicans supporting it. So it's got support on both sides of the aisle. 62% of adults believe federal legalization is a good idea. You know, people say that, well, it's split by age, and it really isn't. One of the biggest user groups for medical marijuana is 55 plus, and a lot of them are veterans. So the veterans organizations highly, pun intended, support legalizing cannabis. So you just keep looking at it, you keep shaking your heads and say, and do I think it's going to cause? Yeah, it's going to, you know, create a lot of opportunities. For example, this is me. If I'm a restaurant owner and the restaurants are facing a horrible comeback trail, if I'm a restaurant owner, I'm going to Columbus and saying, you know what, let's make cannabis legal and let me sell cannabis beverages out of my place. At least I can bring some people into the restaurant. Or let me sell retail like you're letting me do with liquor. They just changed the liquor laws so the restaurants could sell more liquor out the door. They can do the same thing with cannabis to help prop up the restaurant business. You know, these are all the things. And again, you take that money and you put it back into the community too. You create education so kids aren't going out and smoking. Me personally, I wouldn't put anything in my lungs at this point. I can't smoke anyway. I never could. I could barely handle a cigar once or twice a year. You want to educate kids, okay? If you're going to take something, a product, and that's where the industry is going. When you look at the sales data, it's moving away from inhalable products towards edibles and beverages. You'll see Walmart get into it. You'll see Amazon delivering it. I mean, no doubt in my mind that one day, maybe it's only in California to start or New York, you're going to be able to order cannabis products from Amazon and have them delivered to your door. You'll order a bag of chips along with it.
The cookies.
Well, yeah, to me, I enjoy it. It's crazy. It's moving so fast. We are up and running. Our timing wasn't the best from starting a new business. You know, but we've had some very good conversation with people and licenses in multiple states.
But this business that you started up is all self-funded because you can't go to the bank and get a new business loan of any kind, right?
Well, there's a lot of, well, first of all, we're a consulting company. So here's the difference. Knock on wood, we were able to get a bank account. So because we don't touch the product at all, there's one or two, I'm not going to mention names. There's one or two banks. So one of my partners, Dave Patton, he had changed his law practice. He had a son who had dealt with seizure issues. They used CBD to treat him. His wife is a doctor at the clinic, and this is all public knowledge because it's on his website. And he also had worked for the Attorney General in Ohio, so he did administrative law. He changed his whole practice almost 4 years ago to focus on cannabis law, helping people get licenses, appeals, etc. So banking with KeyBank, since he got out of law school, since he started his own practice, not out of law school, his own private practice, they kicked him to the curb when they saw on his website that he was advising companies on cannabis law. The Supreme Court of Ohio specifically said that we're allowed to, as attorneys, advise companies about legal issues, and they specifically said cannabis issues. But KeyBank said, sorry, we're not doing business with you. Now he found another bank, and that's who we do business with because we don't touch the product. That being said, we needed a payment processor for our consulting business. Stripe, who is the payment processor a lot of people use, would not let us do that because we consult for cannabis company. So there's no rhyme or reason. And what a lot of these banks, insurance companies say, we're not touching it. As Griff said, it's a hard stop the minute you see the term cannabis. We phrased a lot of things consulting, but if you go to our website, it's clear what we're doing. And that's what happened with the Stripe. Now, on the other hand, it's not. I think PayPal and another one of the other processors approved us. They didn't have an issue with it. So that's, yeah, it's all over the board. I mean, it's so is ours privately funding? Yes, we still are seeking private investors, but there's a lot of funds out there investing in the cannabis business right now.
Yeah,
but it's been wild. I can tell you that and it's only going to get, until federally, and even once federal legalization, it's going to be probably a 5-year. You got 20,000 growers and manufacturers. The market can't support that. I mean, you don't have 20,000 brewers or vintners either. Shakes out down to 10 or whatever, something like that. But
it'll certainly be interesting to see what happens and how all this shakes out, legally, socially, financially.
Yeah. I just, again, we see that it's going to happen, and we see, I didn't point to those statistics, not because I'm getting away with why it's going to happen, but this is how it's going to implement. Right now, if you decided I'm going to come up with Tom Basie's Italian gourmet cigars, right? You want to become a cigar manufacturer.
Nice.
So to get a tobacco processing permit right now is over 365 days. Imagine 20,000 people wanting to get a cannabis permit at the same time. Well, will they grandfather you in while they're processing it? Probably. But if you don't get your permit, you're going to the back of the line and you got to shut down your operation. That's why you call us, because we're experts in it. We can do it affordably. We can do it relatively quickly. So what our product is, we're preparing you today for what we think the regulations are going to be. That way, when they're written a year and a half from now, we only have to do 20% of the work. If you start a year and a half from now, you're going to have to do 100% of the work.
Okay. What I really don't understand is, why isn't the medical end of this solved like yesterday? I know people who need this and have benefited by it. And what's the downside of medically prescribed marijuana, however it's administered?
There is no downside, but the fact it's still a Schedule I narcotic, which means that the federal government has determined, this is their current position today, that it has no medical benefit, and that it is highly addictive, that you can't even study it. So therefore, you can't do anything with it. You're correct. What they should have done is, and everybody kept kicking this down, like most political issues, they just kept kicking it down the road. Somebody else will deal with it. Clinton came out with a memo and said, let the states do what they want. Bush supported that. Just let the states do what they want. Obama said the same thing. Let the states do what they want. They didn't want to piss off the 30% that still think it's a bad product. So when President Trump came in, one day he says, let the states do what they want. One day he says, I'll legalize it if I get a bill. The next day he says, I won't legalize. Oh, by the way, I'm going to put in Jeff Sessions, who immediately comes out and says he retracts all those former positions, says we may prosecute you guys in the state level. So, you created a bigger mess than ever. Now, Sessions got kicked out of office by Trump. So it's, and Barr came out with a statement that says we're not going to go after the state level guys. But you're right, Tom. It makes no sense. But until they deschedule it, and you could take it to a Schedule 3 and make it where it goes through. But even then, you've got too many reasons why it should be descheduled altogether. Biden, frankly, Biden's old school. I mean, we all know he's almost 80 years old. He was as law and order as anybody. He created some of those horrible situations that have ruined cities. He's changed a little bit, but he still thinks there's more, there needs to be more study. Well, I don't know. The medical community pretty much gets it. And again, nobody's saying turn them loose. Nobody's saying let your kids use it. Nobody's saying, or some people say it's a plant, grow it in your backyard. Use it just if you can grow tobacco in your backyard, why can't you grow? If you can make your own wine or beer, why can't you grow this on a limited basis? Absolutely understandable. But yeah, it makes no sense. I mean, what another, my opinion is, it's being held up because Mitch McConnell knows it's an issue that the Democrats want, and he can use it as a bargaining chip. You vote the Republicans out of the Senate. If you vote the Republicans out of the Senate and the presidency, that bill's gonna be passed by June. No doubt in my mind. Otherwise, there'll be a lot of horse trading going on.
Well, November is going to be pretty interesting to see what happens. But it seems to me a lot of people between now and then should have access to this pain reliever. It's beyond me. Why can't? Maybe somebody already has, but it seems to me if you make a valid argument, somebody's got to listen. Making this medically available to a doctor who signs a prescription for something, it seems to me doctors can prescribe stuff that'll blow the back of your head off, and yet not this. This provides relief. I know my cousin Billy suffers from neurofibromatosis.
Okay.
And it is a crippling, horrible, painful disease. And I'm so sorry that he has to suffer with this, and he needs relief. And he should be able to get this relief from this sort of product.
Yeah, and that you're really going to see it. I mean, when it talks about 72% or 62% believe legalization is a good idea, I think the numbers are about 80% where people think it should be legal for medicinal purposes. But again, part of it is, I believe, the pharmacy industry fought this for so long that they don't know how to deal with it. But it's going to happen.
Absolutely.
And so.
At least, are they lumping the recreational in with the medicinal, trying to get the whole Megillah to go?
Well, from a federal standpoint, what we think is going to happen is, and most of the bills that are in play now say we're gonna deschedule it. It comes off of Schedule 1 right away. I mean, forget this illegal stuff. Now what we're going to say is it's going to be legal at the federal level. We're going to require you to file forms A, B, and C. We're going to require you to apply for a permit, and those regulations on how you get a permit are going to be developed by TTB, Tax and Trade Bureau. If you want to sell for medicinal purposes, you're also going to have to comply with anything under the FDA rules. So if you want to market it as a medicine, you're going to have to comply with those rules. And then they'll also say the states are going to be able to control it. So if Ohio decides we only want medical, then Ohio will say we only want medical. If some states like Iowa, she's fighting a tooth and nail, that they don't even want hemp in Iowa, which they can't keep it out at this point.
Is that acceptable to you to split out the medical?
Well, I think anytime you market something as a medicine, you have to go through different protocols than as a recreational product, right? So if I'm going to say it cures the symptoms of seizures, and I want to sell it and market it that way, then yeah, I've got to go through the testing and things like that. If I want to say this is just a fun product, it's going to relax you, sure. Just go through. So I think you have to do that. But you're talking about high-level medicines. I mean, again, there's plenty of people we know will grab a drink instead of throwing down a painkiller because they don't want to deal with painkillers. Now the issue has become like anything else. If you become addicted, But again, there's no evidence at all that cannabis has addicting properties, as opposed to plenty of evidence that opioids are addictive and kill people. So yeah, it does. It makes no sense. You sit there and shake your head with all this stupid crap going on. You would think this would be an easy one, right?
It sounds like a no-brainer to me. Although it may not be addictive, but I think it is habitual.
It could. Well, again, so can alcohol. You know,
Right, it's cigarettes and
right.
anything.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
there's so many things that we do that become habitual.
And you could be predisposed to it because, you know, there's an alcoholic gene out there. I mean, the
Yes.
Native Americans don't tolerate alcohol.
Yeah, I have
as well.
relatives
It's
that
in
are
the
like
biology.
that.
Right.
You know what? They take one and they are a different person. They just
Right.
can't, and they got to stay away from it. And if they don't, boy, I'll tell you what, man, there's hell to pay. And it's
Well, that's
it's
going
like-
back to Trina's
It's
thing.
weird that I could take 3 and I may get drunk, but I'm still me.
Right.
But they take,
Right.
they smell it, and it's like they're a different person. It really is it's very telling about what it's like to be an addict. That it must truly be. I think, don't they say that addiction is a disease? And it
is.
Yeah,
It's
and
qualified
you
as
could,
disease,
you could
yeah.
see it in somebody that has that that gene that makes it so if they get out of line even a little bit with any substance, they're
Yeah.
like a different human being. But you know, I still wish that everybody that needs it could get this stuff medicinally.
Well, and that's the whole point. I got to roll, guys. Anyways,
Okay,
but
Harry, thank you so
for
much.
the time.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Harry. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Harry.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bye, guys.